Recording. All right, friends, welcome. I don't know why I put the 21st. Happy Halloween. It is the 31st. And welcome to week 2, day 1. We are officially entering our second week, which is really fun. It's Halloween. I don't know why I put 2021. Oh my gosh, what am I doing? It's officially Halloween, and I'm losing my mind, apparently. I did catch a cold, so I'm on quite a bit of cold medication, so maybe that's it. But happy Halloween. Again, it's week 2, day 1. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We have some discussion questions due Sunday. This is, as always, you have your discussion questions are due by 11:59 p.m. I did go ahead and open up all of weeks 1 through 4. So if you want to go through week 4, teach his own. But those are open for you. And then a reminder, they do close at the Sunday of that week. So even week 3, though it's open now, will still close on that Sunday. I can't retroactively allow you to go back and open them up for you to go do them. So just keep that in mind. But please just know, that they are open for you as well. And I can only do up to week 4 because there's other stacks that are currently using that. And so that'll mess everything up. You do have some core assignments due this week. You've got, I believe, 3 of them. Yeah. So it's putting it together. Now, that is just an extension of Prop It Up. We're going to be talking today about state. And so it's really just taking what we have from state, from Prop It Up, implementing state, so that way we can kind of do some fun things there. Tomorrow and Thursday, we're going to be talking about forms. It's really going to take up the majority of our time. Handling forms, handling state from forms, handling that sort of on submit sort of thing. And so we're going to be doing that tomorrow, talking through all of that information and handling. Oh, this is the wrong calendar. Sorry. Same stuff though. Talking through all the forms of validation, advanced forms. We're going to be talking through all of that, so that way we are ready and prepared for that. Today, on the other hand, we're talking about state. We've already talked about props, but we're going to talk about synthetic events, hooks, state being useState as a hook that we're going to use from JavaScript. And we're going to start kind of helping ourselves kind of maintain data. So if you've already taken another language, most of you guys, I think there's only one person in the class that has not taken multiple languages. If you guys are used to sort of session where you can keep track of some data for a little bit, you can sort of think of state like that. It's just going to be component bound, and you can have some sort of information to keep track of. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Diving into JavaScript events, kind of at the very beginning, we're going to test JavaScript events, kind of a recap of that. We're going to talk about hooks, state, and useState implementation. We're actually going to do that so that way our assignment is ready to be, that way you guys can do the putting it together assignment. Cool. Before I do anything, I want to go ahead and create a Vite product or project. I'm going to run. I'm in my correct one. Does anybody remember what I need to run in order to do that? Anybody remember how do I create a new Vite project? I only ask as we get used to it. I won't keep asking, but does anybody remember? Anybody? Yeah, exactly, Brittany. We're gonna do instead of nom, which I know that it auto corrected. Yeah, it's npm create Vite at latest. So I'm doing that. I'm gonna call this, and I know that this is on my other screen. I can move it over if you guys want to see it, but we're just gonna call this state. It's gonna be a React. We're gonna go to JavaScript. Cool. So now if I ls, I see that I've got this state. I'm gonna cd into state. I'm gonna run npm install. It's gonna grab all the information from me, or for me, from my dependencies, from my package JSON. And then we'll go ahead and npm run dev. And then we'll get going on this. Perfect. So now I say npm run dev. Great. So 5173. So I can just say localhost 5173. And we have our project. Now, what we're going to be doing today is here, how we have this count is and then it keeps track of that. That's what we're doing. We're going to be creating something called state using what we call a hook in order to keep track of this information so that way we can build that up, which is really fun, really exciting. Now notice that if I refresh this, then my hook is gone, or my state sort of is refreshed as well. We're going to see why that is in a bit. One thing I do want to talk about is in the inspect tool. Remember, I had stated that you guys need to download the React inspect tool. The developer tools is what it's called. And the reason is because we're going to start looking at this idea of components. Right now within this app, we can look at it and we can see we have some different attributes, some different qualities that's really going to be helpful as we start to build actual React projects and continue to build these. Things like props. So if we're getting some information, we can see, okay, what is my component? I'm expecting my component to do X. Does it have the information it needs, right? Does it have props that's taken in? Oh, it doesn't? Okay, shoot, I need to bring that over. Or we're dealing with state, which we're going to learn about today. So it can start to be a tool. So I would encourage you guys just to get used to how you do that. Again, it's just called React Developer Tools. I think you can just React Developer Tools. If you can just download that. Yeah. So you just come here to Google. Yep. And so it's just this Google Chrome extension. So make sure that you get that downloaded. That will be a requirement. You're going to need it to help problem solve for you. But looking at this, we have a component called app, right? And it just has some information. It's got no props, but it has a state of 0. But notice if I come here and let's get out of there, inspect tool, and I come up, and now it's at 4, and I inspect. I come here, I go to my components, I look at app. We can now see my state says 4. So we can see that it's keeping track of some information for me. How does it do that? Well, let's go to our handy dandy platform. We can figure out exactly how it does that. Kind of going back real quickly, there's these things in JavaScript called a JavaScript event. Can anybody remind me of just any events? You guys learned these in Web Fundamentals, but any events that you learned or if you remember back in the day? Yeah, exactly. Those, great job, Brittany, and great job, Phone. Those are exactly it, right? And onClick is a JavaScript event where back in the day, we were able to go to, let's say, I had like an index. I actually don't want to build this out, but in here, I could have really, like if I had some event, I could just do an onClick and then maybe alert, right? And I could click on that and it works. Like we know how that works. JavaScript, and that's a JavaScript event. Now with React, we have what we call synthetic events. So really you can think about it as from a high level, they're acting the same way. The way that they are communicated or the way that they're called is different, but it's just a different type of event listener. And it's called a synthetic event because remember, everything that we write gets converted into JavaScript. So the way that we handle it's a little bit different. What that means is really just the event names are camel cased. And so in Web Fundamentals, it is on click, everything's lowercase. Here, it is on click with a capital C. So it is camel cased right there. A few different things like returning false will not work with any event to prevent default browser behaviors. So that is something, and you can get into nuancey things of this. These are just some high level stuff, and events cannot be called asynchronously because React pools the synthetic events. So it means it can't be running, one at a time, or it can't be running them simultaneously. So what does that mean? How does that work? Let's go ahead and recreate. Let's recreate this, and we're going to end up adding to state, but for a bit, I just want to click this and maybe an alert pops up. So let's go do that. Let's go into my code, and we're going to go straight to my app.jsx, and I'm just going to delete all of this information. Perfect. Oops. Delete this. Cool. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an H1. And let's delete this and all this junk that we don't need right now. Okay, so I'm going to create an H1 that says click me. Perfect. And so in this element, let's go ahead and use an on click, right? So I'm going to say on click. And so I'm calling an on click event. Remember, because this is in React, we have it as, instead of all lowercase, we have a capital C for on click. And here's where it can get a little bit kind of different. Here we have our anonymous function, that we call, sorry. And then maybe I want to say alert. You clicked on this event. We're going to talk about this here in a second, but okay. Right now, we have just this on click to where if I go to here and I click, I get an alert that says you clicked on this event. You clicked on this event. What is different about this than what you guys have already dealt with? Anybody have an idea? We'll go to something we introduced in React.
You're using an arrow function.
Yeah, exactly, Joseph. Exactly. The reason we're using this arrow function here is because with a synthetic event, if we call our event or we call our function and we have either some sort of information or we have a parentheses, it will automatically run. So if I just had it like this, which is what you guys are probably used to, and I refresh this, you can see it automatically clicks it, right? Automatically. I kind of get this. I refresh, it clicks, right? It automatically is doing it for me. So when we're dealing with synthetic events, I have to, this is a way, this anonymous, this arrow function is a way, because it's anonymous because it doesn't have a name and it's an arrow function, right? This is a way that I can prevent this from automatically running. So if you ever find yourself with your function automatically running when your page is loading, this might be the reason why. So this prevents this from automatically running and is only running once this is actually clicked. Now there's another way that we can kind of handle this is we can abstract this from inline code and actually create a function, right? So I could say something like const h1, oops, const h1 alert, and then just say you clicked on this event just like this. And instead of calling it inline, I just have to go like this, h1 alert. This is us abstracting from being inline and taking the code out, separating that function, and then us just calling that actual function here. And then you can see that this works the exact same. Now, where people sometimes get confused is if you do anything. So right now, because this function doesn't take in any sort of information, right? It doesn't take in any parameters. We can just leave it like this and it works. One thing to please note is anytime your function takes in a parameter. So let's say it was like num or something, something. It took in some parameter and it had to pass in num. Anytime we pass in something, we have to make it an anonymous function. And just like this. Anytime you have this parenthesis, you just associate that with, okay, if I'm gonna have a parenthesis, I need a parenthesis on the other side, right? Those have to be equal within a synthetic event. It's gonna make sense when we start dealing with kind of putting props and state together. But if you have a function that doesn't need a parameter, like this, then you actually don't. I mean, you don't need to do this. You can just say this, and this works just fine. Does that make sense? Yeah, one of you.
Yep.
Joseph, Brittany. Yep, cool. I see a lot of students struggle with this. Just know that if you're going to pass in any information, you have to use a arrow function. Perfect. Okay, so we have abstracted our function outside of our actual kind of JSX code, or what is going to be rendered. And now we have a synthetic event where when it's clicked, we have something happening. Okay, so now let's introduce something called a hook. So in JavaScript, we have a hook is really just sort of a custom function, custom functionality that React has built in that allows us to do certain things. So yeah, exactly. Like a hook, generally speaking, is just a function, either built-in or custom. So you can create custom hooks. There's built-in hooks. We're going to use a built-in hook kind of just at the beginning. It allows you to hook in or use a certain piece of React functionality inside of your functional components. Now, what's nice about this is this hook can allow you to have your component grab some information and hold on to it. So you can sort of think about it like, especially state, you can sort of think about it like session when we're dealing with session with Python or Java. You're keeping track of some information. You can sort of think about it like that. There are a few built-in hooks, really two that we're really going to use. One of them is called useState, and one of them is called useEffect. UseEffect we're going to do a little bit later on when we start introducing the APIs portion, when we're starting to call to a different server, and we're dealing with that. We're absolutely going to use useEffect. But for right now, we're just going to talk about useState. useState. And again, useState is a way that we can keep track of some information. Right? So if we want to display some information and we want to be able to manipulate that data in any way, we can do that with useState. So there's a few things we have to do in order for us to be able to use these hooks from React. Now they're built in, right? It's already used. But the first thing I have to do is I have to bring it in. And what bring it in means is I just have to import it. So if you use the RAFCE, let's say that I come here, I'm just going to create a component. And then I've got a hook.jsx, and I use RAFCE. Then you already have this import React from React. What you can do if you already have this line is just say useEffect or useState, sorry. Now there is quite a few hooks, right? Here, lots of hooks. Use context, useEffect, use reducer. We're really just going to use useState and useEffect. Those are the only ones that you need to focus on right now. But we're going to pull it in just like this. Now, that's something we created. Here in our JSX, we don't have that, so I can import. And then I can just say useState. Remember, we don't need we don't need the import React from React because we're using something like React 17 or greater. But if you already have that in, you just put a comma. Now, if you had it on a separate line, is it going to break anything? No, but this is just a more efficient way for your imports. So we have to basically say, hey, React, I'm going to use this useState, bring that in. Now, notice that it is destructuring, right? It is going into our React library, and we're grabbing useState, and this is a function, this is a hook for us to do something with. Okay. Now let's look at sort of the functionality of we're trying to create a count. Let's see sort of how it breaks down. So when we're dealing with useState, we always say const, and then we say something. So I'm just going to say state useState, and that equals useState parentheses something. So let's kind of break down the structure of useState. We're going to start right to left. So this is invoking the function found in my React library called useState, and we're setting it equal to some sort of value. Now this can be a number, it could be a string, it could be an array, it could be a it could be an object, it can be kind of anything you want. It could be true. What this is just what is it by default? What are we starting at? What is our baseline that we're starting at? So for dealing with count, we're probably going to start at 0. But this is just anything that goes, whatever goes in here is just, hey, what do you want to start out from the beginning? What is our you can sort of think about it like a default parameter. What are we going to start at? Now default parameters, if something gets passed in, then it changes. This is, no, we are starting here. But we'll see how we can manipulate that here in a bit. But then this is our starting. Then this consists of a few things. Our first portion, oops, it's called a getter. And then our second portion is called a setter. So useState, right, has information of, and it keeps track of values. So at the very beginning, just from what we created, we're running this function called useState, this hook. We're setting it to 0. That's its value. We're saying, hey, then we have our getter and our setter. Now our getter says, get me the value currently, right? Give me the current value. So in this case, if I were to console log state, it would just be 0, right? If this was 100, and then I were to console log state, it would be 100, right? It's just getting me the value. useState, on the other hand, is what we call our setter. And we are setting, it is a function that sets a new value for this piece of state. So if I want this to change, I use my useState to change. If I just want to retrieve the value, I want to get some information, I just use state. Now let's pretend that this was count. Notice this is always camel case. So even if this was like multiple words, count and use count, or if it was like total count, it would be like total count and then use total count, or yeah. And so it's camel cased. So just please be aware of that. And so let's say we're setting it to 0. Perfect. Now what I could do is I could have a p tag and I could say total count. And what I do is I just call and or bring in my piece of state. I say count, right? I want to, when the code, when my program, oops, I always do that on my Mac, sorry. When the program gets to here, it's going to go and get my current value of my state, and it's going to show that. So if I come here, I should get total count 0. Total count 0, right? If I were to change this to 100 or 1,000, and I save it, and I come back, your total count is 1,000. I'm just retrieving what that information currently is. I'm going to pause there. Are there any questions on kind of what I did, the structure of state, and how we use that? Just put a 1 in the chat if this is making tons of sense. Cool. Great. Now, knowing what we know, how do you think I could, if I wanted this button, instead of running this alert, let's just comment this out. Every time this clicked, my count would increase. What is something we could do there? Any ideas? What is a tool that we can use? Yeah, exactly, Brittany. I can call my use count setter and say, hey, I want to grab the current information. Let's just increase it by 1. So there's 2 ways we could do this. I can say on click, and then I can just say this, and I say set, oh, sorry. It's not use count, right? Set count. Sorry. It's not use count, it's set count. I messed that up. It's count and then set count. Set whatever. Not use whatever. This is just use state. It's a set count. So sorry about that. So I say set count. And because I'm doing this in line and I'm having to pass some information into my function, right? And I'm calling this parentheses, that means I have to use an arrow function. And then I'm just saying count plus 1. So once I click this, I'm running this function. It runs this function. And it just says count plus one. And so when this is getting the getter, it's just getting that information and it's updating my state. So if I refresh, start at 1,000, I click, and then we go to 1,001, and I keep clicking, and you can see that it continues to increase in count. And if I look at my inspect tool, I can come to my app, and you see that I have a state of 1,012. Now if I refresh, right, it's running and it refreshes that page, and it goes to what did I set it at? It's going to start at 1,000, so it's going to go back to that. So we're not saving this across, like even if they refresh, we're not. That's when we're going to bring in a database to kind of handle stuff like that. But for right now, this is setting it as a default value, and then we can keep track of something. Now it makes more sense if this was just 0, right? It doesn't necessarily make sense to start at 1,000, but we can do that. We can refresh and click, and then you see that my state changes here. Cool. Now I can also abstract this, right? So I can say const on, and then just put my set count right here. So instead of doing this in line, like if I had quite a bit of functionality, I could just say increase count. And this will do that for me. So now if I refresh again, I'm back to 0, but if I click it, it still works just like we expect it to. There's a 2, there's a 3, and so on and so forth. Both ways are fine. If you like to do it in line, you're welcome to. I personally like to kind of bring everything out of my code because I like to kind of work with that. And if especially this makes it, in my opinion, a little bit more dynamic in regards of, let's say somewhere else with on this page, I wanted to use increase count. I could do that versus just having to rewrite the same thing over and over and over again. But it's totally up to you, kind of your choice, especially at the beginning here. Are there any questions with this? Okay. Well, let's kind of build on this, and now let's bring together props and let's bring together our state. So let me go back. Let's see. Let's just create a we'll call it movie dot ASX REFCE. I know I want to use useState, so I'm going to bring it in. Perfect. And I don't have any information, but here we are, right? We have a movie. I'm going to say const. Do I want to go advanced yet? I'm not going to yet, but I'm going to show you how we can do when we have a bunch of information, we can kind of put it in an object and be great. So let's say that we go here. Great. Let's comment this out. Or no, that's fine. We can leave it. But let's say I wanted to bring in movie. Perfect. Cool. Self-closing automatically got brought in via components, but let's pass in some information. So let's say we wanted to say title equals Secret Life of Walter Mitty. It's my favorite movie of all time. And then let's say year. I should know the year because I don't, but I don't. Let's say 2003. And then let's say views or times viewed. And we're going to start that at 0. Perfect. So I'm passing in some props, right? So because of that, I need to pass in some information here. You pass in some information. Sorry guys, give me 1 second. I'm trying to find where it was. Yeah, Brittany, you're right. I did need the curly boys. Need this, like this. That's why it was giving me fits with numbers. Very confused on why I was doing that. I forgot my curly boys. So I can do this. We'll create actual numeric values. Cool. Yeah, so I have my props. And now when I go to my movie, I need to put in props, right? Just props. And then let's go ahead and get my props. So I say const. And then what I want to do is I want to get some information, right? I want to get my props. Anybody remember how I do that? I have some information. Anybody remember how I can destructure? Equals props. Now remember, props is an object, right? With a key value pair. So I just say something like this. I say title, year, times viewed. I'm grabbing those information, and that is equal to props, right? And that's going to destructure all of my props and give me my key value pairs. One thing to note is that props are immutable, right? So when I grab that information, I can't kind of alter that. I can't say, props dot times viewed equals whatever. I can't change that. It's immutable. But what I can utilize is something like state. So I could say something like const. I'm going to say times viewed and set times viewed equals use state, but I don't want to do 0, right? I could do like this. I don't want to rewrite these. So okay. So I'm creating this state of all times viewed. And remember, use state allows me to set, it's kind of gives me my default value. What I can do is I can say times viewed, right? I'm passing some information in through props. I'm creating some information and saying, hey, I can't manipulate this times viewed, but I can create some information to keep track of, and then I can manipulate my data that way. So let's say that here I had movie, let's say H1, and I had movie title is title. I had year. And then I had, let's say, times viewed. Perfect. And then here, I would I put times viewed here, or what would I put right here? Anybody know? What is the information I can grab to keep track of that? Yeah, exactly, Brittany. All times viewed. How come it's all times viewed and not just times viewed? Anybody know? Yeah, exactly. Because times viewed is going to be stagnant, right? It's immutable. It can't change. So even if I click on something, it's not going to change that. I'm not going to be able to keep track of what I'm trying to do. Here with all times viewed, I say all times viewed. This is getting some information, and then I can keep track of that actual information here. Okay, so now that we have that built, we come and we say, okay, great. We have our information, The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, year 2003, times viewed. We can see that that is changing, right? Or we see, sorry, that the props is working. We're able to bring that in. And secondly, in my components tool, I can look at this and I can see my props, and here are the props that I'm getting. So this is a big tool. This is where these tools really start coming in handy, is because maybe you are passing in props or you destructured in a way that actually doesn't render. So let's say you called it time viewed in your destructure, but it doesn't find a key for that. And so if you look at your props, you're like, why is it not bringing that in? And you could be like, oh, it's not getting that specific times viewed. Why is it not? And you can look at it and be like, oh, I forgot the S, or I can compare it, stuff like that. So that's where these tools really come in handy. But here now we have this, right? So let's say that I also, in this, wanted to have a button that said view movie. Cool. And anytime this button was clicked, I wanted my information to be increased. Okay, so what I can do is I can say on click equals. And I can either do it inline, right? To where I say something like this. I say this, my anonymous function, and I say set all times viewed plus one. Come here and refresh, click it, and then now that changes. Or I could abstract this, and how would I abstract this? How can I get this out of my code here? What if I didn't want this in one line? Yeah, exactly, Brittany. I can come up here and I can actually create my function where I say const view movie, it's an anonymous function, and all we're doing is we're saying set all times viewed plus one. And then now, instead of running this, I just say view movie. Easy peasy. This code works exactly the same. Now for your assignment, this is exactly what you have to do. When we come to this putting together, all you're doing is you're creating a person. So we're going to do that, right? Where we create, you pass in some information via props where you have two people, Jane Doe and John Smith. You have an age and you have a hair color. You're passing all that information in. Then you're creating this button for each one. Now you can hardline this, like you don't have to, you can hard code this. You don't have to put like birthday button for Jane Doe, birthday button for John Smith. You don't have to like birthday button for and then concatenate the name. You can if you want. If you want to make it dynamic, you can. But once you click this, the age increases. It's going to work the exact same way as what we just did, right? To where I have some information. Remember, I'm not trying to change my props. Props is immutable. I can't change my props itself. I create a state. Now, please note that the last thing I want to kind of bring in here is if somebody wants to give me another movie. Anybody have another movie they'd like?
Spider-Man 2.
Spider-Man 2. You got it. Where did that come out? Let's say 2008. And then Brittany, you've been super active. So we'll absolutely, and I love the old HP. So we'll say Harry Potter. Which one though? Oops.
Number three.
Number three, my lord.
I was thinking Prisoner of Azkaban, but good Shrek reference right there.
Oh, that's my favorite Shrek. He's like, pick number three, my lord. And he's like holding up two. It's elite.
That's
Wow,
funny.
Justin, you or Omar really knows. It is Spider-Man is June 30th, 2004. And then Harry Potter, um, let's say Azkaban. Sounds like 2008. That's fine. Prisoner of Azkaban? Maybe. It doesn't matter. Now, when we look at this, we have all of our code, and notice that though I just have a component, I just have one movie component, right? And I have all this information, but each component lives compartmentalized from the others. So when I click this times viewed one here, or times viewed and view movie, notice that state is confound to its component. If I inspect this and I use my React developer tools and I say components, I've got three separate entities of that same component, and each one is different. Here we have Spider-Man 2, props, and state. That is associated to that specific component. If I go here, I got Secret Life of Walter Mitty state that is just there, right? And so it allows us to kind of interact with our code where this can be increased. Our state is separated and not having to do anything with the other components. Though, and this is really where the strength of React comes from, I just had to write one component. That's what rules about it, right? I just had to write this, and now I have multiple instances of this component that are all sort of separate from one another. I can utilize them the same way. There's a way that we can, what we call lift state, that if we wanted some more information, we can. That's a little bit farther down the line. But just knowing that this state right now is tied to this component and this component only, which is kind of sweet. Now, we're pretty far ahead of schedule of what we have to do. So is there any information or any questions on what we just did? You should definitely be able to do your assignment, putting it together from this. But are there any questions of what we just did? Anything that isn't clear? Anything that doesn't make sense? Okay. I'm going to briefly talk about lifted state. We're not going to go into it right now because that's something, just because we have 17 minutes left. And I think it's just something to kind of think through, keep in the back of your mind. Right now, this state is tied to here. It is tied to this specific component, right? But if we think about it, what if this component called another component? It was a parent of another component. So let's say I had a component called review.jsx. REFCE. Great. Cool. And maybe this review, I just wanted an H4 that says review. And I'm going to show the review there. Well, what if I want to grab all that information and I want to be able to, maybe instead of review, this is hypothetical, right? This isn't a great example, but let's say that I wanted to do something like this. The review, I had movie title, and then I had movie year. Oops. And then I had, what did I call that? Oh, views, total views. And then I had review. Maybe I wanted this to not show that information. We just want to be able to click and view movie. That's all we want to do. But I wanted my review to come in. And I wanted to have access to my state. I wanted to have access to my information. Because this component is a parent of another component, because this component calls this component, I can take my state and actually pass that down through props, right? So let's say review. Yeah, we'll just say movie review equals this movie rocked. Now this doesn't make sense because now each one's going to have the same review, but let's just say I'm just trying to show you what lifted state looks like. State can go downward, it just can't go upward. Meaning I could pass my state from a parent to a child. So here, if I had in props and I destructured my props, I say const. This is props. And I said title. Said year. Times viewed. And I said movie review. Perfect. Ooh, great question. It would be all times viewed here, right? So it's passing it down as times viewed, but the value it's grabbing is all times viewed. So let's say I wanted to increase that. I'm still passing down my all times viewed here. Now remember, this could be like unicorn and cupcake. These are just what I'm going to refer to them, passing them down. So I can, by grabbing that and passing the state in down as props, this is what we call lifted state. Again, we're going to talk more about this when I actually like lift state, and we'll see why we're going to do that here in a bit. But now we can see that this still works. You've got this movie that's got some state, and then we have this review. But what's kind of cool is my movie has the state of 1 because it has my all times viewed. And then if I go to review, it also can take in that information of times viewed 1. So though I have state of all times viewed in my movie, the only way that you can transfer state is from the top downward. So you can go parent to child. You cannot go child. You can't pass it up. And you just have to give it to the parent, and then the parent can take it in. But we can still abstract this. And so even though the state is created on my movie JSX, I can, because review is a parent or a child of that, I can just pass it in via props. And now review has access to that state. And so even if I change it in the same way that my button is still on this one, and so my state is changing, but I can still click this and still update my state from my movie component. My review still gets that information because it's a child. And you can even see the way that this developer tool works. The app is the parent of all of them. And then you have movie, and its child is review. And so that's the way that we can pass state kind of back and forth. It goes top to bottom, kind of like cascading. Parent can give, think about like an inheritance, kind of sounds like a weird thing, but oftentimes it's the parent that gives an inheritance to the child. The child doesn't, hopefully the child doesn't die, but doesn't give something to the parents, like an inheritance, what we know it as, like the parent passing something down. Same sort of idea.
Good question in chat.
Yeah. So Johnny, great question. So in review, yes, because it's a prop, right? But where I'm manipulating it is the parent. So the information in review would be, yes, immutable. That's a great question, Johnny. But where it is still being changed is my movie. And so that change is sort of confounded to the parent. The parent makes that change. And it's okay. And then we pass it down to the child. Sort of like a will. It sounds weird. I know I'm on like the parent-child thing, but parents can make a change. Child can't. It's like once you get it, you get it. So then if you, in theory, wanted to, you wouldn't ever want to like then manipulate that state again. You would have to put that in another state. And then you get in a really bad, kind of not fun way of doing that. So, but does that make sense? Are there any questions on this? This is all I have for today. We're just talking about state. Tomorrow we're going to talk about forms, really start bringing those in. But are there any questions on what we talked about today? We talked about state. We talked a little bit about lifted states, though that is a little bit more of an advanced topic. So if that kind of went over your head, don't worry about it. We're going to keep talking about it. But are there any other questions on what we talked about today? Okay. Just a little blink into the future is tomorrow we're talking about forms and validation. So really passing some information. We don't have a database yet. And I'm just going to be frank with you. These next couple of weeks are going to feel weird because we're not dealing with a database. There's going to be moments when I say, for an assignment, you got to do this, but it's not going to matter because there's certain things until we introduce the database portion of it. It's kind of, just being frank, it's kind of a stupid route to go because you're not going to do that. Like putting everything in state and like in a certain way, it's when we get to like to-do list. And so some of these assignments is more of a challenge. Like when we get here too, because we don't have a database, can't keep track of that information. And then once we introduce MongoDB here, then it really comes together. So I will, but I'll let you know. I'll be like, hey, this is not really how, like hold this loosely because we're not going to be doing this very much longer. But tomorrow we're going to deal with forms, and we're going to see there's going to be two different ways. Tomorrow and Thursday, that's really our focus. We'll talk about conditional rendering one of those days. And what we'll do is we're going to, basically, there's going to be two ways we could do it when we submit forms. We can either break state, individualize, so each different, input has its own state, or I'll also show you how to put it as an object. But if we do that, then in the same way that we are handling state from an abstracted way, that's why I always like to show you that because this is how I do it. And this is how often I see it done. We're going to need to handle it a little bit different, the way we do that. So I'll show you both ways, but that's what we're going to do tomorrow and Thursday as well. As a reminder, I will be out on Tuesday. We will still have class. We'll have Robert. He's going to come and help. And then Garrett is actually going to walk through one of the optional assignments back from JavaScript that really show map and filter. So I think either on Thursday, either an office hour or in class. We'll see how far we get in forms tomorrow, but in class, then we'll see sort of map and filter and how that works. So, but Garrett's going to be doing an optional assignment in office hour on Tuesday that'll still be recorded. So are there any other questions, friends? Okay. Well, with that, I hope you guys have a wonderful night. Please make sure you do your discussion questions. Don't forget about your assignments, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a happy Halloween and be safe.
Happy Halloween. Thank you.
Take care, everybody.